This is Kat Pierce, your host with ABS Commercial, and we're asking technical and cultural questions that impact the world of fermentation. Welcome to Fermentality Pro. This episode's guest is Bryan Richards, sales manager for G4 Kegs. G4 Kegs is one of ABS Commercial's preferred partners and are experts in all things kegs. Hey, Bryan, thanks so much for joining us today.
Excited to be here.
Hey, Bryan, why don't you tell us a little bit about G4 Kegs and more specifically how you got involved in the beer industry?
Absolutely. At G4 Kegs, we got our start in 2012 in Bend, Oregon. We have since moved our headquarters to Tualatin, which is just outside of Portland, Oregon, and we service the western half of the U.S. out of that warehouse, and we have another warehouse in Virginia Beach, Virginia, that we service the eastern half. We are the largest independently owned, independently and family-owned keg supplier in the country.
That's one of the biggest reasons why ABS Commercial has specifically chosen you guys as a preferred partner. We're all about being independently owned. ABS Commercial is obviously also independently owned and family owned as well.
As are most of the clients that both of us serve.
Work with, yeah, exactly.
And I got my start in the beer industry. I think we're in phase 3.0 of the craft beer industry, something like that. I think
at this point,
right. The latest wave of craft beer. When breweries were just starting to open up, I was a traveling sales rep outside of the industry at the time, and I was gone every week, Monday through Friday, oftentimes in 2 different cities a week. I would actually got to the point where I was forgetting my room number.
Oh my gosh.
And I would write, after knocking on somebody's door and having security called on me, because I was like, why isn't my room key working? And I gave it a knock and some stranger opened. I'm like, that was my room last night. And like, these are perfectly sober moments just coming home from a day of sales calls.
Oh my gosh.
So I started to write my number, like literally I did the pen on my palm so I would know where I was staying.
Oh, I do that for pick locations when I go to the back to pick small parts. Because I don't want anyone to know that I don't actually know where that pick location is. I've done this plenty of times. I should know, but my memory is crap.
We're all getting to be a certain age and that happens, right?
For sure.
So this is when craft beer was first starting, and most cities only had like 1 or 2 breweries or 3 or 4 a max, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not the kind of person that's going to go check into my hotel and be a wallflower and watch TV and just, veg out. I'm in a new city. I want to explore. I want to see what the food scene's like, the beer scene, the now beer scene. And so I would find these breweries and I would just go sit there, have my laptop, taste their product, do a flight. And I started a blog. Didn't do social media at that time, but I just started with a blog. It's still out there, called The Wandering Gourmand. I haven't touched it in probably 5 years, but for archival purposes, I kept it out there. And magazines started to reach out to me. In fact, I was down in Miami once taking a photo, and this lady's like, "What are you doing? Like taking a photo of a beer?" I said, "Well, I do a blog."
Why?
And she's like, "I work for a magazine. Here's my card." And that was actually my first published article.
Oh, wow.
And so from there, I started writing for larger blogs, started writing for beer publications, travel publications about beer, and I eventually quit my full-time job in corporate America, and I was a freelance writer for about 5 years.
That's impressive. I think I might just lose it, doing nothing but writing for 5 years. But you're writing about things you enjoy. So, I mean, and it's beer. Like, why not?
It is. And here's a little secret. Like, when you're a freelance writer, you're as much a sales rep as you are a freelance writer, because you are selling your writing services to magazines. You're pitching ideas. Yes, you get those relationships with editors, and they'll call you up and say, this happened with Beer Connoisseur. Hey, Bryan, I want to do, an article about, name a topic. And I'm like, yeah, I could run with that one. So you start to get those relationships, but for the most part, you're selling a lot. But I was able to, develop that career. I landed bylines in Men's Journal, Beer Advocate, All About Beer. I was in Allegiant Airlines, In-Flight Magazine, and a lot of regional travel publications. Then a lot of those clients started to close. A lot of my magazines I wrote for closed, and it was either try to develop the blog into something full-time, but a little secret about me. I'm terrible at social media, and I was not able to promote myself in that way. Or it was look at my sales skill set, which allowed me afford to be a freelance writer for 5 years, and merge that with my, here's an old word because I don't know what the new word is, Rolodex of brewery owners. And I then started applying for jobs for vendors that were selling into the craft beer industry, so selling to breweries. And I did that about 5 years ago, 5+ years ago, which then landed me at G4 Kegs, where I've been for 4 of those 5 years.
Okay, excellent. Have you ever had any experience in like homebrewing during this time that you were just like, popping around to different breweries, or was it solely just like, having a couple of beverages at new breweries you've never been to?
Well, I was a home brewer. It didn't start during the craft beer phase. It actually started a little before that. I was laid off, and I enjoyed good beer. I always did. I always have enjoyed good beer. I was never a fan of the macros, but I couldn't afford to buy the beer I wanted to drink. So here I am drinking Keystone Light. And I went on to a website for a home brew shop, one in Charlotte. And I was like, okay, for the same amount I'm paying to drink Keystone, I could brew my own beer. So that's, kind of what got me started brewing beer. It had nothing to do with the industry. It had to do with a desperate need for quality beer on a budget that I couldn't afford.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I wish that at the time that I was 21, that I was like smart enough to had known, what, I really do like this, like new, because by the time I was 21, craft beer was like, starting to get a little bit more, I mean, let's be honest, it had already gotten to, a significant point to where there was at least like 2 or 3 breweries in each city. And I loved that beer, but the only time that I could ever like actually enjoy it was if my parents were taking me out. So I wish that I had thought about homebrewing at that point in time, but it just wasn't a part of what was actually going to happen in my life up until, I started working in breweries.
Yeah, I had other interests when I was in college. I wasn't wanting to spend the time to brew beer.
No, yeah, for sure. I did a lot of skiing and, just bumming around and drinking for free.
I was a frat boy. We'll just leave it at that.
So ABS Commercial has chosen G4 Kegs as a preferred partner for many reasons, including the fact that you guys are independently owned. But one specifically is our shared vision for a consultative approach to assisting new breweries with forecasting and assisting them in a successful and profitable first year in business. Can you share with our listeners about what this consultative approach looks like?
Absolutely. I actually love working with breweries and planning. That stems from just my passion for the industry and my passion for seeing the industry continue to grow. And I also feel like I do have an expertise from my business knowledge outside of beer to help them out. Mm-hmm. And so, I have various ways that I introduce my sales team to breweries and planning, various ways to flag breweries and planning in our system when they come in through our online portal, because they need I wouldn't say hand-holding because that sounds like a negative thing, but they need a little bit more guidance on getting started with their keg fleet.
Oh, for sure.
In many ways, breweries come to me all the time and they'll say, well, I need about 600 kegs. I'm just kind of pulling a number, 600 sixtels and 200 halves. And I'm like, whoa, that's a substantial order for a new brewery. Let's schedule a call. Like, I'm not going to quote them on something that they don't need. Because one, breweries are starting on shoestring budgets and they don't need to overspend on stainless steel that they're not quite ready to use yet. So
absolutely.
I'll schedule a call with them, or my sales team will schedule a call with them, and just start walking them through, okay, what size system are you brewing on? Okay, well, given you're maybe brewing with a 10-barrel system, what do you view, if you're in your business planning, what is your first year's estimated output barrel-wise? Because we use that number then to dial back into what they need to get started.
How often do brewery owners actually come with a number on that? Because I feel like that would be difficult to predict.
I'd say about 50-50.
Okay.
Because some of them they are projecting on what their revenues are going to be, And so, doing their first year revenue projections, they do have that number. But that's about 50% of the time. The other 50% is when I then start to ask more questions that, okay, well, you don't know how much you're producing. Tell me how many fermenters you're going to have. You're going to have 4 10 barrels. All right, well, that means then we start to look at their max. If that system is used, maxed out, what you can produce. Do you think you're going to produce that many barrels in your first year? No, we're aiming for about half of that. Awesome. So then I'll take that number, and then I'll start to ask them, are you going to be a distro? Are you going to be taproom sales only? Are you going to be mix of the two?
Right.
And depending on what their answer is, I'll come up with a fleet, estimate for them. And the reason why it's so important to know the difference between distro and taproom only, and even geography has to play with this too. When you're in distro, when those kegs are out in the wild, you need more kegs when you're starting out for distribution than you do for taproom only. And breweries don't realize that starting out. They think, oh, well, here's the kegs I need. Well, when you have a keg that's out for 3 months, it's not being filled. It's just one sale in that keg.
Yeah.
And when you get into breweries that are in, we'll say, larger states, or where the population is more dispersed, well, like North Dakota and South Dakota, I mean, those are some of my favorite breweries to sell to because they need a ton of kegs.
Right.
Because once those kegs leave the brewery,
they may not be coming back for 6 months.
Absolutely, yeah, 6 months or longer. And so it's helping them to find out, where they're located and what their business model is going to be.
For sure. So when breweries are ready to acquire these kegs, G4 Kegs offers 2 options between purchasing outright or leasing. What are the benefits of both options, and what should brewery owners consider when deciding which option to move forward with?
Sure, and I'm going to mention a third option that we don't do, but it's out there, and I think it's worthy of it's worthy for anybody considering opening a brewery or that's just running a brewery to know about, and that's the paper fill model.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll look at the pros and cons of each. Obviously, your best bet financially is, and this depends on the size of your brewery, is always going to be to buy your kegs outright.
Right.
You're not paying interest on them. You're not paying financing charges. We have a lease program, and I do get a lot of clients that say, all right, I did the math on, broke down my monthly payments on what it's going to cost me per keg per month, and I multiplied it by 36 for the 36-month lease, and that's a lot more. That's more money than the price of the keg. Well, yes, it is. Well, why is that? I'm like, well, we have a financing company we use, and they're in it to make money too, just like you are.
For sure.
They're a business. They're not going to give you money for free. So there is interest you're paying with those leases. So always the best bet is buying it. And I guess backing up a better way to look at it, an analogy I love to use between the 3 models. It's when you're acquiring a car, right? You could rent a car as your daily driver. That's the pay per fill model.
Right.
They are, covering some of the logistics, not as much as they promise. And so if you're considering that model, really you need to value what your benefits are, because the price of that model is like renting a car as your daily driver, where all you're really responsible for is putting the gas in. They're going to take the oil. They're going to manage maintenance for you. Then leasing, it's like leasing a car, right?
Right.
With the lease to own option. And then finally buying outright. And the best bet is that buying outright. So where leasing does come into play, though, is we mentioned the shoestring budgets that breweries are on when they get started. Oftentimes, they realize as they're opening, they don't quite have the capital for kegs, because kegs are not cheap. They're not super expensive, but they're not cheap, and it catches a lot of breweries and planning off guard.
Yeah.
Or they wait until the last minute and they're like, crap, I need kegs, and I am flat out of cash because I just spent it all on decorating my tap room. And that's where leasing comes into play. And even when breweries are expanding, a lot of times after, they're putting out money to buy new fermenters, maybe a larger system, they spend a lot of the capital, and they don't necessarily want to spend it on kegs, so they will lease kegs in that situation. Your paper fill, and in my opinion, the pros of it fall if you are distributing to a large geographic area.
Okay.
And if you're not doing that, you're really paying for a lot of services you don't need, and quite honestly, that you aren't receiving.
So, what would you consider a large geographic area?
Well, let's use Raleigh Brewing here.
Okay.
Right? So, say Raleigh Brewing is going to tell me we're going to enter into North Carolina, South Carolina, and Virginia, and we're going to be managing multiple distributors across all of those states. In those instances, you might consider going pay-per-fill.
Okay.
But it's significantly more money. I think I was doing a balance, a calculator comparison for a client of mine, doing a rather large purchase of kegs, which we're looking at, close to a full truckload of them, and what it would cost to lease versus what it would cost per pay-per-fill over 3 years, and they were looking at spending an extra $100,000.
Oh my gosh!
So that's a lot of money. That's real money. Now that's where you have to value. What do you want to outsource? Like, I don't clean my house, okay?
Right.
I outsource the cleaning of my house because it's something I don't want to do. I'm willing to pay that. I mow my own lawn, but this year I've been traveling so much, I'm not there to mow my lawn. I'm outsourcing that. I'm going to insource it soon if I get off the road because I don't like writing that check. But so I look at the outsourcing, the cleaning. Yeah, that doesn't hurt me financially, like my family budget or what I'm writing a check for. It hurts me to write that lawn mowing because, quite honestly, I like mowing the lawn. It gets me outside. It gets me exercise.
For sure. So what are some other products that G4 carries that breweries should consider having on hand?
Yeah, we really stick to kegs only, but we carry all sizes you need. We carry your halves and your sixtels, which are the most popular. We carry 50 liters and quarters. When it comes to 50s, halves, and sixtels, we sell them in both stackable and non-stackable. And it's kind of interesting that it's really geographically driven on whether breweries want stackable or non-stackable.
Right.
Then we do carry some more unique products, but still within the family of kegs. We do 10-liter kegs. We do firkins. We do pins. But two of, I think, really our coolest products right now, given the ever-changing landscape of the alcohol industry and the beverage or the craft beverage industry, are our threaded sixtels and our 2-gallon growler kegs. So these are kegs that have Sankey spears, but they're not the drop-in spears, so you don't need to buy an expensive tool to extract the spear out.
Right.
We have a tool that you hook up to your socket and you screw out the spear. They're extremely popular right now amongst breweries and restaurants and even large concert venues and sports arenas.
For cocktails.
RTD cocktails, ready-to-drink cocktails, absolutely.
Well, I mean, in North Carolina, they actually just put into place the ability to have to-go cocktails. Yep. These breweries or restaurants or whatever could be, purchasing these kegs to, give out to customers to have cocktails on draft.
And I read
at home.
I read an article that, and Jay's going to love hearing this, our marketing manager, because I managed to weave Taylor Swift in here for him. But he's a major Taylor Swift fan. But I read an article about arenas arena stadiums where Taylor Swift was playing. They knew that audience was going to be wanting more cocktails than beer. Mm-hmm. And they also realized they didn't have the staff to mix cocktails for each customer that wanted a margarita.
Oh, for sure.
So they were kegging cocktails specifically for the Taylor Swift concert.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Also, let's say you are a, traditional beer bar brewery and you have these, your staff, has just become accustomed to solely serving beer. If they have never served a cocktail before, that having these pre-mixed cocktails is a great way to ensure that your staff doesn't have to worry about learning a new skill. Not that learning that skill is a bad thing,
right.
For sure, but it saves you time on training and ultimately money on training. Also there are a lot of people that prefer just to train or just to serve beer and not deal with liquor. or cocktails, making cocktails. So, you're going to be able to retain those folks that previously may not have wanted to do that.
And for states where a brewery has to have a separate license to sell liquor in an RTD cocktail, they're also using these kegs for mixing hard seltzers. So they'll make a flavorless hard seltzer, and then they'll use these kegs to mix in their flavoring agents.
Oh, nice.
So it's easy to just combine them and stir them and not having to mess with their beer brewing equipment.
So, pardon. One of the things that I noticed that you guys had on your website was actually a keg spear removal tool. Can that be used for all keg spears or just the threaded kegs?
Great question. That is just for our threaded kegs.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're going to remove a spear, and so here's a big difference between threaded spears and non-threaded, or the drop-in spears. The drop-in spears are not meant to be removed with each cleaning. You
Right.
are compromising that spear, which is a major safety issue to your staff and potential customers, and you are voiding your warranty with the spear manufacturer. And most people are using micromatic spears. That's all of our kegs come with micromatic spears.
Right.
And so you should not be removing those with each cleaning. Threaded spears, you can. They're meant for that. In fact, I know your audience consists of a lot of homebrewers.
Oh, for sure.
But a lot of homebrewers love our threaded kegs because it allows them to have the flexibility of a corny keg. But
Without having to switch out your couplers, for sure.
Absolutely, yeah.
That is a pain that I specifically deal with a lot at home, just because and I've got couplers out of the wazoo at this point, just because I lose them. And more specifically, the holy cow, I'm having retrieval issues. The ball lock adapter
Right.
that you put on top of your just Sankey D coupler. Those are, I lose them just because, they get lost in a bin or whatever. To be able to have, Sankey D as a home brewer would be so much easier.
Absolutely. Yeah, I actually have one at home. And I have one of our 2-gallon growler kegs, and I use it at the Super Bowl. And no, most of my male friends drink beer. Most of their wives don't. But their wives thought it was super cool that they were drinking a cocktail off of draft.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, they thought that was the neatest thing for them.
Or cider, or
Yeah.
a sparkling mead, a sparkling wine,
Yeah.
whatever. I mean, I have a 2.5-gallon keg, torpedo keg. But I would love to be able to have like an actual Sankey 2.5-gallon or 2-gallon, specifically to take out onto the boat. And just have like the small CO2 cartridge that you can just use to charge that tiny keg. That would be awesome on the boat.
Well, I know of one of our industry partners that can help you out with that.
Ah.
Yeah, our good friends at Cold Break. They actually sell. It's really neat. It's a jockey box that fits, and it comes with one of our 2-gallon growler kegs. We call them growler kegs or Gregs, and they come up. You also get the cartridge that you're talking about, and the little mat. So when you spill, it's like a mobile bar. You got to check it out.
Oh, I need to check this out because I just bought a boat literally yesterday. So I'm like looking for all of the things to, host a party on it.
Is that why the intro music was "I'm on a boat"?
Yeah, I'm on a boat. So in addition to the obvious needs for kegs, how important would you say purchasing a keg washer is to a production team?
I think very important. For one, a lot of breweries will tell me, "Oh, I'm just going to remove the spear with each cleaning." We already went over the issues with that. I mean, don't. If that's what you're thinking of, don't. Like, I'm just thinking of.
It's also just a pain in, excuse my language here, but it's a pain in the ass to have to remove that spear. I mean, having to deal with the ring around and trying to get that in and out is
Absolutely, yeah. So then, what are your options? You could buy a threaded, one of our threaded kegs. We only sell those in the 2-gallon and the sixtels, though. So if you're looking for half barrel, unfortunately we don't sell.
Yeah.
So you are going to lose out. Because the way I advise clients is when you're starting out, or just in general, my rule of thumb is for any beer served in your tap room, try to run that on half barrels.
Mm-hmm.
The reason is you're not going to kick kegs as often, and your staff is going to spend less time changing out kegs and more time with your customers. And plus, it's actually cheaper. 3 sixtels equals 1 half barrel, and it's not the same price. 3 sixtels are going to cost you more than a half barrel.
Right.
So financially, it's in your best interest to go with half barrels when you can, and it's less time cleaning the kegs. So, if you're going to tell me I don't want to buy keg washer, then you should just be using threaded kegs, and you're spending a lot more time where you don't need to be spending time as a brand new brewery owner or an existing brewery owner.
I think personally it is a great way of retaining your production staff.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the importance of having something that's easy to use and that isn't going to take up as much of your time. That's going to allow you for more time to do things like, maintenance,
right,
or brewing.
Right, because then your next step is, okay, you're going to borrow, time on a neighboring brewery's keg washer, and that may sound like a good idea to start with, but now you have to sometimes pay them to do it.
Oh, for sure.
Or give them some of your product, and you may think that doesn't cost you any money, but it does. Because it's not just ingredients you're losing the profit on that.
Oh, yeah. And let's say something goes wrong, like you get a stuck mash and that causes you to have an additional hour, and you scheduled a certain time to go over to your neighbor and borrow their keg washer. And then they need it, when you're about done. And at that point, it's kind of like, okay, well, I missed my window to wash kegs. What am I going to put this beer that I just brewed in?
And sometimes other breweries, depending on what you're making, they want to know what was in that keg.
Oh, for sure.
In particular, we have a lot of cideries that try to, they're starting on a smaller scale than breweries. They'll try to skirt around the keg washer, and they're like, well, we'll just go talk to a brewery. And a lot of breweries will say, nope, you're not cleaning a cidery. You're not cleaning a cider keg on our keg washer, just beer.
Wow.
And they're worried about bringing additional, infections into or things that could really affect the brewery itself. Now, I'm not an expert in that field, but I recommend getting a keg washer. We recommend ABS to our customers because really for the value you are don't want to I know I'm not saying this just because I'm on your podcast, but for the value of it,
yeah,
it's the best. It's the most value for a new brewery getting started. It does what you need to get started. It's not a huge chunk of change, and if it is a huge chunk of change. We partnered with you. I don't know if you were aware of this on a brewery in Charlotte that was opening up, and they couldn't quite afford a keg washer. So we did a package deal with the kegs and keg washer. We financed through our leasing company, so they just had one easy monthly payment.
I didn't know about that. That's super cool.
And it was really interesting, and I think this is a good case study. The brewery in particular was really afraid of space, so I drove out there after talking with the ABS team and just, got the measurements, got the power requirements, and looked around the brewery and had my tape measure and said, your keg washer will fit right here. Like, literally help them place it.
Here you go, a key.
Yeah, it was awesome.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah, no problem. But honestly, it was really getting that consultative approach. So like, you guys need a keg washer.
Oh, absolutely.
And then they were telling me we're considering going with paper fill. And this is where I get back to paper fill. Know the benefits you're getting and not what you think you're getting. Read the contract, because they said, we want to get paper fill because they clean the kegs for us. I don't know of any paper fill models in the country that clean kegs. So they're going to be paying more money for their kegs. They're going to be paying more money for their kegs and stuff to clean them.
Yeah. And that's definitely more expensive than most breweries who are starting out. I mean, if not all,
right,
are, willing to pay. So, we were talking about this a little bit earlier about the pain in the butt that it is to get your kegs back, and more specifically, be able to track all of that. What do you recommend for keg tracking regarding distribution?
Ooh, this is always a very difficult question.
As a previous sales rep,
yeah,
this was one of my biggest frustrations.
I think, once again, if you're starting taproom only, you don't have to worry about it, because it's not a consideration.
Right.
If you're getting in distribution and you're starting small, once again, you don't really have to worry about it. Simple spreadsheet could track it. Like, okay, we just sent, and your management system should be able to track this for you and say, okay, we just sent 10 kegs to blah, blah, blah brewery, right? And then as they come back, you just check it off. Or not say brewery because I'm a distributor. But it's when you get beyond that, and then you want to start evaluating, all right, what is my keg loss?
Right.
You want to first know what your keg loss is before you start investing in a keg tracking system. Right now we recommend Keg Shoe, and why I like Keg Shoe, I've never used it, but why I like it is I've been into multiple accounts and unsolicited, they've told me we use Keg Shoe for our keg tracking and absolutely love it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Because there's a QR code that they send you, you put on your keg, you're scanning it, because what happens is your distributor is not going to scan it, because that requires them to get the software.
Right.
If you don't have a distributor, or if you think the distributor is going to have individual accounts scan the kegs in and out, that's not going to happen because the accounts aren't going to download the software.
Right.
So, you have a bit of an uphill battle that you're fighting. But this way, you're at least scanning those kegs as they leave and say, okay, it went to ABC distributor. It went to Joe's Tavern down the road. And you'll know it's there. And what I like about it is it ages it. It says, hey, you have a keg of IPA that's been out for 90 days. You probably want to know where it is and pull it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and curiosity, is for me, not just like IPAs, but also looking at the historical data. Do they also track historical data for how long a keg might last at one particular account?
They do.
Oh, that's even better.
They do. And now they're getting into, I know there's another company similar to them called Keg Convoy. And they're now starting to get into actual geo trackers on the kegs. And that, once again, that comes with a cost.
Right.
To the point where, and I don't know the benefits of both of them, Keg Shoe versus Keg Convoy on that, but I believe they have some way of even reporting the temperature of the keg. So
wow.
So if that keg is just left and it's sitting in 90-degree heat, and you're like, whoa, that's a beer that probably just went bad.
That's impressive.
And that's your reputation, as a brewery owner, as a business owner. So, but that comes with a cost. So, I mean, I'm a big dollar and cents person. I train my sales team with show me the money, right? I believe we need to show our clients the money and not have them pay for things that they don't need. Well, that's getting a whole consultative approach, but helping them decide, what is important to them. And if your keg loss isn't that large, you might not need to invest in keg tracking. You want to figure out where's your break even. If you're already paying for lost kegs, now you're paying for tracking software. If you're not seeing that return, you don't need it. But if that's going to drop your keg loss, then absolutely it's worth every penny of it.
For sure. I mean, I remember when I was working for a really small brewery in Cary, North Carolina. We distributed our kegs, to mostly just like small local restaurants and tap rooms and things like that, focusing deep more than wide. Mm-hmm. And we essentially would take a Dremel and Dremel in a number for each keg, and then cover it up with Sharpie so that way we could see the number that each keg was. And we tracked that on an Excel spreadsheet. Yeah. But that was hard because, what if you don't update the Excel spreadsheet? Then, you're like, okay, where is this keg actually?
Right.
And there was a certain point where we're like, okay, we probably need to look into doing this because we don't know where 20% of our kegs are.
That's when you need a keg tracking.
Yeah, honestly, for sure.
Because I would say, depending on where you're at, it's anywhere between 0 or up to 10% is, or I would say 5% is your average keg loss. And if you're getting above 5%, you really want to figure out what's going on. Some of that's just retraining your staff. If you're self-distributing. Like, hey, when you go into an account, pull the kegs.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Go to Keg Alley and just grab all of our kegs. Because trust me, the bar doesn't want it there either, right? They want their kegs gone.
They just take up a bunch of empty space. I mean, it's not utilizing your real estate.
and quite honestly, I don't know what the different markets threshold is, but one way to mitigate it is if it's not going to lose you accounts, charge more for your keg deposits.
Oh, for sure.
You know, if a $50 keg deposit is not replacing a keg.
Right.
And a lot of breweries default to $50. You know, $100 is going to cover a sixtel and then some, right? But it's not going to cover half.
Yeah.
And so, you know, consider making your keg deposits a larger amount, or maybe even make it the price of the keg. You know,
right.
So replacement for a sixtel is $79, and the deposit's $79. Because if I don't get it back, I have to buy a new one.
I mean, I remember we raised our keg deposit at one point in time, not here at Raleigh Brewing, but at the previous brewery that I was mentioning. And people just lost it, though. They were like, what happened? You know, like, we can't afford to use you anymore. And it's like, dude, if you continue to work with us, you're going to pay this deposit one time, and that deposit is just going to roll over. You know, like, what's the deal? Like, just keep us on tap, and that's the cost of your deposit.
And that's where it's what can the market handle. That's why you need to, if you're starting out, talk to other breweries. Find out on average what their keg deposits are. And if they're all at $50 and you're the new guy in town and you're saying 100, don't.
Yeah,
now,
for sure.
I do know that there's a brewery in Charlotte, one of the largest ones, and they charge $100. I know it because I have it for my homebrew. Every once in a while, I'll get a keg from them for my home kegerator, and they could command it. Because if you want their beer and everybody wants their beer on draft, you're going to pay it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So G4 Kegs' mission is to elevate. It says directly on your website, our industry is driven more by passion than profit, and we're here to empower and amplify that passion by giving it a vessel, ... Literally. I think we can all agree that sentiment is very true for anyone working in this industry. Can you specifically speak to what passion for beer looks like for you and how you reinvigorate that passion when things get tough?
Oh, that's a great question. And I did lose my passion for beer recently. So my passion for beer was, I'm a foodie, you know, through and through. From the time I was a child, I remember sitting in the kitchen with my grandpa, learning how to make all his good old homemade Italian recipes, right? Hand rolling noodles, making homemade, you know, Sunday gravy. We call it spaghetti sauce, but I know some Italian Americans will they'll slight me for that. You know, making homemade pizzas with them, homemade calzones, and so I've been a foodie my entire life. My dad was the grill master. I was out there learning all his recipes, and I don't have any of them written down. They're just all up in my head, and so I've always been into big tasting things.
I'm the same way. My dad and I grew up specifically hunting and fishing with my dad and like cleaning our own, meat and fish.
I'm not that passionate about
preparing it. But I mean, it was a situation where we also talked a lot about how like different flavors go well with one another and how we could also, go outside of the box and things like that. We talk about food all the time. And it's funny when we go out to a restaurant and we're with my grandparents hate it because we're always sitting here going through the menu and like, what are you going to get? I'm thinking about this. Ooh, this also sounds good. And they get so annoyed, but it's because we're all big foodies.
I actually had to dial it back at lunch because I'm like, all right, I don't really know everybody here that I'm having lunch with today. I'm kind of just, I'm new to them. I would have studied that menu for a good 20 minutes if you would have let me before I ordered. But I also knew we had to get over here to record. So, yeah. But given that we were a big Italian family, beer wasn't our drink. My grandpa always had Jenny Cream Ale on draft, which is disgusting in my opinion. Sorry, people over at Jenny Cream Ale, but it is. They would always have wine, and maybe it's you always have a bit of a rebellion against your family, no matter how good your upbringing is. You always want to rebel in some way, and I think that being a beer fan was always my rebellion. Against 'cause my dad was a big wino. He made homemade wine. My grandpa did. They also wine was at every meal, and so I always sought beer. We'd go out to dinner, and my dad ordered a bottle of wine, and I'd order a beer that wasn't Bud Light or Miller Lite or any other macro. I'd always find, okay, what's an import? Because there weren't a lot of craft beers back then.
Right.
And so I've always had that passion for beer because I appreciate the artistry in it. And I appreciate that. I believe that brewers are more chefs than anything else. They're chefs, they're artists. Their passion is going into it, and I appreciate that passion.
Oh, absolutely.
That led me to the industry. That led me to why I was visiting breweries in the evenings while I was traveling. That led me to want to work in the industry as an industry partner. Now, I did lose my passion for beer. I have an 8-year-old, and for those of you in the audience who have kids, you reach a point where you get done with the day and you put the kid to bed and you don't want to analyze anything. You just want to sit there and slam a few beers.
Yeah.
And I found myself literally he went to bed just knocking off. It was always something local and craft. But I found myself just knocking him off and not appreciating him and chasing that relaxation, chasing that buzz. We're being frank about it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And I actually think working at G4 helped me to stop that. There was a point where if a new brewery opened in Charlotte, this is pre-kids, my wife and I were there. We were each getting a flight because we have very different beer tastes, and we couldn't share a flight. We had to have our own. and so we would get our flights, and I stopped doing that. And our company owner and president, Max, whenever I started going out with him as we were traveling together, he would always get a flight, and I had stopped getting flights. I was usually like, what's the highest ABV, and how much of it can I get? That's where I have because of the behavior of managing stress went, and Max is getting flights, and I'm back to getting flights.
That's awesome.
And that really, I think, helped me, he helped me redevelop my passion for beer.
Yeah, I will definitely, coming from kind of like the opposite angle, I agree with you on the sense that, you go home and you've had a stressful day and you want to just, slam a couple of beers and then just, relax and, not think about anything. I am right there with you on that sentiment. But for me, the kind of on the opposite direction, I have always had a big appreciation for beer. And then I started working in the homebrew shop, and I got my certified Cicerone. Then I got my certified BJCP, and I was really, 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 really analyzing beer. And also, after working in the homebrew shop, I got exposed more to mead. And I mean, I'd always been exposed to wine, but I really started getting more interested in the intricacies of wine as well. And cider and all of these other beverages that I wasn't paying any attention to because for the past, 8 years, I'd been focused so much on beer. And now I've gotten to the point with beer where unless it's a really good beer, it's not worth the calories because I am going in and, doing so many other interesting fermented beverages because I'm really just more interested in fermentation as a whole. Now, don't get me wrong. You put a PBR in front of me, I'm slamming that thing because I love a PBR or...
I will not hit on... I may have hated on Jenny Cream Ale, and that might be bad memories from sneaking beer at my grandpa's. But I will... Listen, I went to Daytona 500 this year, and I bought a case of PBR for the weekend, and all my craft beer... Well, I know craft beer fans won't admit that, but my father-in-law was like, you work in the beer industry, what are you drinking with PBR? I'm like, I cannot...
It's a classic!
I cannot slam a 7.5% IPA all day at the Daytona 500, you know?
Yeah, especially when it's as hot as it is. I mean, and there's nothing wrong with the PBR. I feel like I'm also following through with the sentiment from, a lot of craft brewers that, as they're brewing this beer and they're in the heat or they're in the extreme cold or whatever it may be, at the end of the day, they don't want a 12% imperial, pastry stout.
Right.
They want something light and crushable. So they want an Italian Pilsner or, sometimes a PBR or a Miller High Life.
I actually did an article for one of the magazines in Charlotte, and I interviewed, asked pretty much every head brewer in Charlotte what their shift beer was or when they're kicking off work. And a very large number that weren't trying to do the marketing line said Miller High Life.
Yeah.
And I was
Or Hanks. Oh, I could also slam a Hanks too.
Hanks. That's a new one to me.
You've never had Hanks?
No, I never even heard of it. Is it a Raleigh thing?
You know what? I don't even know what it is. I think it's a hipster thing, to be completely honest. There's a bar in Raleigh that has it. I'll point you out to it, and you can go there and try it because they always have Hanks.
Yeah, and I was doing what I did back when I was a freelance writer. I did a trip over to Belgium, and yes, I did go out to West Vleteren and tried St. Sixtus from the source. It was I was there on one of the few days when they're actually selling to the public to go. I walk into the cafe across the street and I was like, "What's this line for? To get a table? Because it looks empty." And the lady goes, "No, this is actually we're randomly selling 6-packs to the public. You could buy 2." And that's the line. And I got on that line and I called my wife. I said, "Honey, you're going to need to buy me all new underwear, socks, and T-shirts." She's like, "Why?" I said, "Because I'm throwing it all away so I can make room for beer." Like literally sacrificed. I'm like, "Run to Target, honey. I'm going to be home tomorrow and you're going to be happy."
I feel like I would be that way with New Glarus. Like if I went up there and I just got a bunch of spotted cow, like I would be emptying out my entire suitcase or buying an additional suitcase and like filling that.
Yeah. This is a rant. Where do we even get started on this?
I don't
know. But I think to get you back, because I think you're talking about, how it really has to be good beer for the calorie. I think a way to, advice that I could offer is, start doing flights again.
Yeah.
And when I find that I lost that passion, I'll go into a brewery and I'll take the G4 hat off, right? I'm not going to leave my business card behind. I'm not going to put a sticker on the wall. I'm going to go in there with my family, maybe my wife, maybe a buddy, maybe by myself. I've been known to sit at breweries with my Kindle and read for hours. But I'll go in and I'll do a flight. And that it brings you back to why we're all
roots.
here.
Yeah. Exactly. And I spoke with Aaron Gore about this. I was telling you about him being on our podcast before we started, but, we talked a lot about reminding ourselves of why we're here. And, finding ways to reinvigorate ourselves. And for me, like, I feel that professional development and anytime I go to a conference, like that's what reinvigorates me and reminds me why I'm doing what I'm doing. It's seeing other people's passions and also being able to like network and, you're talking to the people who are in it with you, you know? I think it's the people and the professional development and the ability to continuously learn that is it for me.
I have a bit of a different take on attending a lot of those conferences because I'm on the trade show side and I'm just sitting at the booth all day.
Yeah. And I mean, like, definitely for, CBC or any time that I've been at the trade show booth for ABS commercial, it is definitely very different.
But we have, partnered companies, friend companies, however we want to call it, ABS and G4 Kegs. Cooperative. Yeah. We have been at CPB Connects, that's Craft Beer Professionals Connects, and Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine's Brewery Workshop together. And those are ones where, as a vendor, you're sitting in the room, hearing the presentations, hearing the talks. And I agree with you. And those instances, I had a new appreciation for the industry and better understanding of where my customers are coming from. And because when you're a brewery owner, you aren't just a brewer, right?
Right.
Many times you're not even brewing anymore. You're HR, you're maintenance, you're the janitor, your marketing, your everything, your payroll.
The wearer of multiple hats.
Yeah, and we forget that, I think, at least from the keg point of view. I tend to forget that, and that was a nice, humbling reminder of everything that my clients are going through, which is, oh, they didn't call me back, oh, they don't like me anymore, they don't want to buy my kegs. No, it's because they got 12 other things that are in front of them at one time.
For sure. We just discussed multiple ways in which we've collaborated together, including at different conferences and presentations. In fact, I'm pretty sure that we're also doing a presentation with CBP, Craft Beer Professionals, a virtual one coming up here soon. I think we're recording that in like a couple of weeks.
We're recording it next week.
Oh, dang. Yeah.
Get ready.
No, I'm just kidding. But anyway, more than ever, I feel that the power of collaboration has become imperative for success. Can you speak to what other companies that you collaborate with outside of ABS Commercial, and more specifically, why collaboration is so important?
Yeah, and we, let's start out with ABS Commercial, quite honestly, because we collaborate with you on keg washers.
Yeah.
When companies come to us, they've already bought most of their equipment, if not all their equipment. They're not coming to me and asking me for a recommendation on a fermenter or a centrifuge or, name anything that is used to produce beer. They're asking me on any keg adjacent product. So they're asking me about keg washers. As I mentioned before, best value I think in the market is an ABS keg washer. And the fact that you generally, from what I've experienced, you have them in stock and ready to ship.
Right.
There's no lead time. And that's another huge bonus. But beyond that, we mentioned Cold Break earlier.
Yeah.
But they're definitely a valued partner of ours. We carry their jockey boxes. They carry some of our kegs. If you look at their very cool cold one, I think the success of that cold one is based on our 2-gallon growler keg. I don't know of anything else like that in the marketplace.
You're going to have to show that to me. I'm very excited about this jockey box.
Yeah. Keg Shoe's another partner.
Right.
We mentioned them earlier. If we customers looking for keg tracking, we recommend them over there. And we have various other partners. We do have a G4 Kegs Alliance, and it's a referral system where if somebody's referred to us by one of our partners, if they mention it, we're going to give them a discount on their kegs. And vice versa. Many of our partners in that referral program are also offering a discount if they know they came from G4 Kegs.
Cool. Yeah, I think that it's incredibly important to be collaborative, especially in an industry that, I don't want to say is declining, but we are definitely going through a rough spot, right? And so, the ability to be able to support one another and be able to point people towards other companies that you believe in, and, increasing that trust of your customers.
Right.
It's not even just collaboration between vendors. It's also increasing trust, which is huge.
And that's something I spoke about at CBP Connects in Portland, Maine, the other Portland I have to call it. But I was there and I gave a talk on developing positive vendor relationships. And so the audience there was a room full of breweries. There were some vendors there too, like both of us. But, I would say 90% of the attendees there were breweries. But, if I were to flip-flop and say how to develop positive customer relationships, I was given that same talk to a room full of vendors, right? They're collaborating with each other. We're collaborating with other suppliers in the industry. It's also having that collaboration to breweries, right? Helping each other innovate. Give me some ideas. They're going to help me as a keg company better serve you, and tell me what's keeping you up at night. What are your current issues? What do you think I as a keg supplier can help you overcome?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the whole statement you just made of what is keeping you up at night. I mean, that's definitely something that I feel more vendors especially need to be asking. That's where the full consultative approach comes around,
Correct.
So you mentioned that you were a homebrewer previously. So for our homebrew listeners, tell me about a beer that you have made that you are particularly proud of.
None. Absolutely zero. Like, I made absolutely disgusting garbage beer. Okay. Like, the only people that liked it were my wife and my dad, because they had to like it. Like, my mother wouldn't even try this garbage I brewed. There's a reason why when I was, ending my writing career and going back into sales, why I didn't call a brewery up. Like, I can't. There's a reason why I don't own a brewery. I can't brew. Like, it is not in my skill set. So there isn't a single one I'm proud of.
Okay, well, damn.
That's why I work for a vendor, not a brewery.
Okay. So my next question for you is, if you could travel anywhere in the world to try a beer, where would you go and why?
I had to think about this one for a while. because I've done a lot of beer travels. Like I've done a lot of people's bucket lists. I've done Belgium, right?
Oh,
I did Bamberg, Germany. I attended Stark Beer Fest in Munich. I don't want to go to Oktoberfest. I think it's too much of a party for me at my old age. But right now, I've been to Maine several times for conferences, but I've never left Portland, Maine. And at the last conference that I was actually able to listen in on all the seminars and just to hear about the vast variety of breweries in that state, in particular the farm breweries, where everything that they're serving food and beer wise is pretty much coming from the land. It's coming from their farm. I want to visit those breweries. I want to rent a car and I want to hit up Allagash because that's a bucket list brewery for me in Maine. And I just want to, see what I could stumble upon from there.
Yeah, absolutely. When you go to Allagash, have a Saison for me.
And they're such cool guys there. I've interviewed them for several articles. They're just very kind with their time. Whether you're a small blogger or coming at them with a magazine, they've always been open to allowing me to have access to anybody on their team.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you a question that wasn't put on this list. Are you ready?
Yeah.
All right. It's your last day on Earth, and you have the ability to build a 6-pack of whatever beers you want. It can be just 6-pack of one beer. It could be a mixed pack of 6. It can be whatever you want. What is your 6-pack?
Okay. And I'm going to get judged. I know people are going to be judging me left and right.
Hey, nostalgia is a thing, okay?
Yeah. I'm going to put in Blue Moon.
All right.
Right? Because that's what really, kind of kicked it for me with beer is having a Blue Moon. I know that's it's macroly owned, but that kind of got me realizing, what could be different for beer. It's what I gave to a lot of people starting out as craft beer aficionados. That's one. One of my favorite craft beers of all time is Stone's Arrogant Bastard.
Oh, yeah.
So that's going in there. What's the doggy giving an opinion over there?
I guess Kenzo wants to give an opinion. There's barking in the background. We got distracted.
I'm putting Coors Light in there because that was the first beer my dad ever let me have a sip at. I remember attending a race with him, and he's like, "Here, son, take a swig of this."
Nice.
And
that was Yingling for me.
Yeah, full circle. I ended up spreading my dad's ashes at that track.
Oh, yeah.
So, a bit of emotional beer for me.
Yeah, I get that.
Surf Wax from
Trophy.
No, wait, am I the wrong one? I'm thinking Burials.
Oh no, you're right. I'm sorry.
Surf Wax, I think is Burial started as a farmhouse brewery, and I think only a Burial could produce a beer like that.
Still choked up about that Coors Light.
No, I'm trying to think. I need like 2 more beers for my pack, right?
Hey, you can, like I said, you can make 4, 2 of those up to 4 or whatever.
Really, I'm thinking back to my trip, Penny Pot from De Strasse Brewing in Belgium. I would definitely pop that in there, and then some Westy 12.
Very nice
To round it off.
I'm in love with that 6-pack.
Yeah.
I did have a lot of nostalgia in there. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think that it's memories, right? Beer should be helping to create memories, not erase memories.
Absolutely, 100%. That is going on a T-shirt. It'll be an ABS and G4 Kegs.
I like that
collaborative.
Yeah,
T-shirt.
I like that. Yeah.
All right, my last question for you is: if you were a beer, what beer would you be and why? These are silly questions, but it's fun. Just amuse me.
I think I would probably be a very aggressive IPA, maybe even like an American Strong, because I've been told that I could be overpowering to be around.
Well, I haven't gotten any of that, so I enjoy your presence.
Yeah. Actually, after we're done with all the panels next week, let's see if you still feel that way.
Okay, fair. Well, Bryan, thank you so much for joining us today for Fermentality Pro. I really appreciate it. And, this conversation was excellent. I really do look forward to working with you more in the future. And for you listeners here, check out G4 Kegs. And this is Bryan Richards.
Awesome. Thank you very much for having me. I enjoyed it.
Cheers.
Cheers.